All right, let's get started. Welcome, all of you, and thanks for joining. Welcome to the basic course in ornithology, which has been running on the NPTEL platform for a few years now. And we'll do a little bit of introduction, or not introduction, really. You've seen the introduction to the course, but there are some questions about the overall structure, and especially the assignments and assessments. We'll talk about a little bit of that. And if you have questions broadly about how the course is run and about assessments, please let us know in the chat. And then, of course, the main purpose of this weekly meeting is to discuss the content for the first week. So we'll get to those questions after that. So I'll just begin by introducing myself, and then I'll ask my colleague Dr. Jaipal, who's here, to introduce himself. We are the two instructors for the first week. So my name is Suhail. I work with a non-profit organization called Nature Conservation Foundation. My background is in research and ecology and ornithology, but now I work a lot on public outreach and education, public engagement to do with birds and nature overall. But my interest has been in animal behavior and also in analytical methods, quantitative methods for finding answers to questions, research questions we may have. And you'll see some of my lectures related to that later in the course. Jaipal, would you unmute and introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, thanks, Sugil. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jaipal. I work with Salim Ali Center for Ornithology and Natural History at Coimbatore, southern India. So, my primary interests are toward taxonomy, diversity, and evolution biogeography. And I think the first week, two of my lectures cover these aspects broadly.
Great, thanks, Jaipal. So, just to remind everybody, this is a 12-week course on the NPTEL platform, and you have a set of pre-recorded lectures to watch every week. And then there's also an assignment, which is usually, well, actually in all cases, every week it's a multiple choice quiz test with a number of questions on it. So you have several days to take the quiz, and it's an open book kind of thing. So you can refer back to the lectures and the transcripts and so on. So the idea is not to make it difficult for you to answer those questions, but more for you to encourage you to engage with the learning material that's there. And the course, of course, is structured to cover a whole variety of topics in ornithology, including sort of basic understanding like taxonomy, classification, and also physiology, anatomy, and then to do behavior, ecology, populations, conservation, and so on. So I think it'll be interesting to all of you. I hope it will be. Also, every week we have a live session like this, an hour-long live session with the instructors whose pre-recorded material you would have viewed that week. Now, I know that the material for week 2 is already out, but Jaipal and I will not be dealing with week 2. So the end of next week is when you'll get to interact with the instructors for week 2. I'm aware from the comments in the question answer in the discussion group that the captions for Sahas's lectures are incorrect and refer to a previous instructor, Anand Krishnan. So those captions will be replaced. Sorry for that mix-up. Also, I saw that there was a question about where to find this discussion group. Somebody said everybody refers to a discussion group, but I can't find it. If you go to the course dashboard, so NPTEL, the course dashboard, from where you access the lectures and the reading material and so on. On the top menu bar, there's a link that says Q&A. It's alongside, let me see, the other things, announcements about the course, Q&A, progress, mentor review assignment, and so on. Okay, so just look at your course dashboard, and there's Q&A above, and that takes you to a Google forum where questions can be asked and will be answered. Some other questions, I think one was about the format of the final exam. So, as you might know, all the material in this course is free for you to consume, all the pre-recorded the videos, the lectures, and the interactions, and so on. There's no payment needed. But if you want a certificate, whether to take it for academic credit or just for your own satisfaction, that requires you to sit for a final exam, which is an in-person exam. You have to go to one of several, many centers. I think there are over 100 centers in India, and there are a few abroad as well. And you'll have to go there and write and take the exam. And you know that the description of what criteria need to be met for you to get your certificate. The exam is structured in a similar way as the weekly assignments. It is a set of multiple choice questions, but it's not an open book exam. So for that exam, you will need to study and remember the material because you won't be able to refer to the videos or the reading material or the transcripts or anything like that. And that will happen in April, if I remember correctly. If there's any other broad questions about the course itself, please do type in the chat box. I have myself, I have just a short lecture as an introductory lecture, which is an introduction to ornithology. It's not very complicated. There usually aren't any questions related to that. Exam is about May 3rd. Okay, so my mistake. So you'll go, I mean, it will be announced by NPTEL. So they are the ones who conduct the exam. Yeah, so there usually isn't much for me to talk about today. Again, if you have any questions about the Introduction to Ornithology lecture and or anything broadly related to the course or to birds, please ask them now. Otherwise, I will hand over to my colleague Jaipal because I think there are a set of questions, Jaipal, for you, both on the discussion group, which is online, as well as through the form that has been that people have been circulated and people have written questions. Mr. Ramurthy, if you want to type your question or you can unmute. Just a second. There's a question from Abhijit, how to prepare for the exam. I just said you just have to be familiar with all the exam questions are from the study material, that is from the pre-recorded lectures. So if you've been able to keep up with the course, view all the pre-recorded videos, take the weekly assessments and do well in those, then you should be fine for the final exam. You can possibly get an internship. Yeah, this is something that you may need to figure out for yourself. NPTEL has, I think, some fellowships. That's the kind of thing that we'll circulate to all participants near the end of the course. What are some further steps that you can take? Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question, please?
Sorry, just a second. So depends on what kind of internship you are looking for. And of course, very interesting that you're doing an MBA, but you would like an internship in ornithology. That's very nice. Yes, sorry, somebody I didn't see who had unmuted.
Yeah, it was me, Ram from the US.
Yes,
so
please.
a quick question. In your lecture, you had a like a timeline for all the ornithologists over the years who had contributed towards the body of knowledge. Can you give us a reference as to where I can find that original thing? Because
Yeah.
trying to get a screenshot and try to print that, the resolution is very poor. So
Yes,
I
yes.
would like to,
Yeah,
appreciate it.
actually, in the reading material linked for this week, for the first week, there is a paper by Shyamal, L. Shyamal. That it the figure comes from
Okay,
his paper,
got it. I'll
and
find it.
yeah, and it's a free PDF, so you can just click on that and download.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, you're
Appreciate
very
it.
welcome. Yeah. That reminds me, there was another set of comments about the kind of unavailability of some of the reading material, that they were behind paywalls and so on. I myself, and I know Jaipal as well, we've tried to put ungated PDFs as links or ungated links for you to look at in the reading material. But I should have also introduced Amrita Rajan, the teaching assistant for this course. Amrita is also here today. And we'll work with Amrita to see whether we can either find ungated articles, PDFs of the references that we put in the reading material, or try and replace as many as we can with articles that are in the public domain. It is, I know, frustrating when you click on something and it requires some subscription or login that you don't have. I completely understand. Yeah. So, Amita, if you could just make a note about that, let's try and find reading material that's open for everybody to view.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Thanks. Quick responses to some of the questions in the chat here. Are there any field trips? No, there are no field trips connected to the course. Dilip, I'm afraid this course is entirely online. It is too much to organize in-person events for 2,000 or 3,000 students for the course. So, but depending on where you are, and if you want, you can ask in the Q&A in the discussion group. Just tell us what you're interested in, where in the country you're located. There are enthusiast groups, birdwatching groups in pretty much every city and town in this country, and we can put you in touch with a local group with whom you can do some field trips and go birding if that's of interest to you. In Bombay, of course, there are many such groups. The extra study materials, no, the extra study materials are precisely that. They are extra. You don't need to read them. It is in case we put them there in case you want to pursue some interest, in case you want to pursue a topic to more depth. That's why the extra study material is there. It's not necessary to look at those or study those for the exam. Of course, we are very happy if you do so because it will deepen your understanding of ornithology. Yes. All right. If there aren't any more general questions or about the first lecture, then Jaipal, maybe I'll hand it over to you. I don't know if you have the questions handy, or would you like me to read some of them out?
Yeah, I have, Surya. Amrita shared.
All right, great. Thanks, Jaipal.
Yeah,
Then over
yeah,
to you.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Bye.
Okay. So there's a question from Skill. I can go ahead, right?
Yeah, please go ahead, Jaipal. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a question from Priyanshu Kumar. Can we identify whether the species is male or female just by hearing their calls or songs? If yes, then how? Well, generally, yeah, quite a few taxa of birds. They do have, dimorphism in the sense the vocalization. Males and females will have different calls, like our Asian coil and some of scimitar babblers. They do have different calls, but other than that, most of the passerines, the songbirds, the males tend to have a very complicated song where the females have just a contact note. So, but it's taxon dependent, and unless you have really good experience with birding through vocalization and other things, it's pretty difficult. But you can refer to standard field guides. Next question is Sushanta Maji. Sir, is there any chance of forming a new species as two species interbreed between themselves and possess characteristics of both parental species? Well, there's always a likelihood, and there have been a lot of documentation of two species breeding, and then that evolves into different populations, which again evolve into different species. Like for example, we have like the recent example is this Italian sparrow. Italian sparrow is a hybrid actually. Originally, some 150 years ago, this one small hybrid population was recorded between house sparrow and Spanish sparrow, and European tree sparrow. So both European tree sparrow and the house sparrow, they mated. The male of house sparrow, the female of tree sparrow mated. And there was a small population in Italy that forms a hybrid. But dramatically over the next 100 years or 150 years, this population expanded rapidly and started diverging completely in its vocalization, behavior, and even nesting ecology, everything from both the parental taxon. So what happened is that recently the Italian sparrow has been recognized as a distinct species. Perhaps this is probably the first time that a new species was recognized from the hybrid hybridization events. So there is always a likelihood, right? And there's another question, Mandar Jagannath. This is a general question. Okay, this is about the discussion forum that Dr. Sukail has already mentioned about the discussion forum is there. And WhatsApp group is, no, I don't think NPTEL hosts any WhatsApp group. Amruta, can you answer these things? About question from Mandar Jagannath.
Yeah, so this is regarding the discussion forum. I think Suhail already answered. It is in the NPTEL portal. You can find when you go to the Q&A. So yeah, once you logged in, you will get to the portal, and then there you'll get to see the when you go to course, the basic course in ornithology. In that, you will find Q&A. So in that, you can go to the discussion forum. Yeah. So you can start a thread by asking a subject, and you can before asking a question, please go through the discussion forum, because if someone has already posted the question, then you don't need to ask the same question. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Amruta.
Yeah.
So the next question is Nitin Kumar Raghav. It's very interesting question. It says that if you take two species with almost similar geographical distribution, like white-capped redstart and plumbeous redstart, then why is that one is sexually dimorphic and the other is not? So what makes the basis of such evolutionary adaptation? So the evolution of sexual dimorphism has multiple pathways, and I'm afraid this goes probably a little beyond that things, and maybe later weeks you might find answer to this question. And what are these evolutionary pathways that lead to sexual dimorphism or sexual monomorphism in birds? And so perhaps you need to wait for things. And Dilip D'Souza, 2 questions and a comment. In tracing the evolution of modern birds, Dr. Jayapal spoke of the Big Bang versus gradualism. I didn't quite follow why Big Bang fits better with tecodonts, the arboreal origin hypothesis, whereas gradualism fits better with theropods and cursorial. Okay. Okay, I think, I have kind of portrayed school A and school B. So that's more of a convenience. And of course, the tecodont versus arboreal, because tecodonts are smaller and the arboreal theory fits into that, or theropod dinosaurs, which are larger. So the cursorial hypothesis would fit into that, the cursorial hypothesis for the evolution of flight. But the third one, that's what the Dilip D'Souza is asking about, saying the Big Bang versus gradualism, basically the diversification of modern birds, whether before the KT boundary or after the KT boundary. Okay, that has nothing to do with whether it is tecodont origin or whether it's theropod origin. That's completely independent of the things. But it is just to summarize that there are 2 big groups of people who believe in these 2 theories. So. And what is gleaning, the feeding behavior of leaf warblers? Okay, gleaning is actually a foraging behavior by which especially the smaller birds, canopy birds, they glean food, they glean insects or food from the, from the canopy or from the branches, leaves and other things. So basically they search, pick the insects or fruit or seeds or something like that from the plants. So that's what gleaning, either from plants or from the ground. Okay. And thanks for the comment. And the next question is Ram Ramamurthy. My question is related to the idea of endemism. Are parameters like geological isolation, where tectonic plate movements millions of years ago, barriers like the Palkad Gap and plentiful of food resources throughout the year sufficient to explain endemic species? Okay. Okay, so this is a question about how endemism, evolves in birds. Yeah, one of the prerequisites for endemic birds to evolve is that isolation from its conspecific and congeneric populations. So in that sense, yes, tectonic plate movements millions of years ago yeah, that did contribute to that. But in more recent times, the endemism is actually also confined to the islands, basically, the mainlands and islands. And of course, the geographical barriers. And, it'd be surprising that sometimes even the rivers, big rivers like Brahmaputra, act like a barrier, even though birds can easily fly across the river. It's not that birds cannot fly, but then they do, it does serve as a barrier because for some reasons, like, the birds view these rivers as a barriers. Like, for example, you have lots of examples of, especially the Timalids, the babblers in the northeastern India, where the Brahmaputra, north of Brahmaputra and south of Brahmaputra. And so that does contribute to the speciation. And so surprisingly, like back in central India, so you have a small river, Pench. It's actually a tributary of Vainganga. So the Pench River is actually maybe 200 to 300 meter, 300 or maximum 300 500 meter, half a kilometer width. And so Pench River divides, you have this Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh. The eastern side is Madhya Pradesh, western side is Maharashtra. It's very interestingly, you have grey jungle fowl on the Maharashtra side, where the red jungle fowl in the eastern side, Madhya Pradesh side. It's just that they can easily fly. It's not that they cannot, cross the Pench River, because it's not a, the river has lots of rock formation. It can easily, but still the river forms a barrier, and it's quite, interesting to see the patterns. So yes, barriers are important besides the geological events and oscillations. Second question is that, will an understanding of why the urge not to migrate among the endemic species explain why we have this phenomenon? Okay. Okay, so why the endemic birds do not migrate? Well, I think probably the later courses, you have one class on migration, and also the dispersal and migration, where you may find detailed answer to this question. What triggers migration, or why some species, even within groups of the related species, why some species migrate and some species, do not choose to migrate. So probably third or fourth week, I guess. My final question is, were all endemic species created thousands of years ago? In other words, can one create endemic species, say, with climate change? Yes, sir. I think, as I told you, the previous, participants, the example of Italian sparrow. So speciation is not necessarily, through a geological period. Speciation can occur even within very short time, surprisingly very short time, like 100 years or 150 years ago. Like, for example, it has been very documented very well in the cichlid fishes, the freshwater cichlid fishes in the African, lakes, Lake Victoria, Lake Tanganyika, both the lakes, they have documented the evolution of more than 50 new species over the last 100 years. So maybe if that is possible, well, endemism could also evolve, very recently as well. And the role of climate change in the evolution of endemic taxa, well, there is a possibility, but I'm not know of any example, that could demonstrate this. Next question is Malay Sarkar. There are two questions. The first question is that providing list of reference book for week 1, week 2, which untraceable for me due to cost. Okay, I think this is what Suhail, talked about it in the introduction. And I think we will work out a way to make these catered resources accessible. Second question is that about the mode of question pattern for final exam. I think, Amruta, can you please answer this question? Or Sugil?
Yes. So, sorry. So this is regarding the articles, right?
Yeah, on both the questions, the final exam pattern.
So the final exam patterns, like Suhail initially discussed, it's like MCQs, and there are some MSQ, multiple select questions. So more details regarding the final exam questions will be updated in the NPTEL portal, like from the NPTEL team, because they are conducting the exams. Yeah. I mean, when did the exam happens and how many questions are there? Everything will be released in the portal notifications. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Amrita.
Thank you.
The next question is Valmiki Rakesh. I'm a student, and what would you teach me about the birds' education? I'm not very sure. Is Valmiki there? Can you elaborate your question, please? Are you here? Valmiki Rakesh? Sorry, I couldn't get your question. What would you teach me about the birds' education? I think this course is the basic course in ornithology is an educational thing, right? So it's about ornithology, basically the fundamentals of ornithology. So I'm not sure what exactly you would like to have. Anyway, so the next is okay, no problem. So that's all the questions we have in that
Yeah, there are
list.
some questions in the
On the chat box. Okay.
yeah. So someone has asked,
Okay, field trips.
so in the second lecture of your diversification, I can read out for you.
Okay.
So in the second lecture of diversification and classification, you have said a few things about why there are some endemics in the mainland of Indian avifauna.
Oh,
And
okay.
another
I
one,
got the
yeah.
question. Yeah. Subramanian. Okay, I had asked these two questions at the end of the presentation. So one is that why are there very few endemics among the Indian avifauna? Because see, India has actually 1,350 plus birds, out of which only 78 right now, actually 79 species are endemic to the India as a political boundaries. So it's amounts to almost to 5% of the Indian avifauna. It's quite low compared to the greatest diversity of birds, because India actually ranks ninth in the world in terms of number of bird species. So the reason is that, one is that there is some biogeographical reasons, in the sense that first is that when the Indian plate collides with 48 to 50 million years ago, the Indian plate, separated from Gondwana, from then Australia, Africa, then Madagascar, then almost for 100 years it was isolated and then hit the Asian plate 50 million years ago. So that's when the Himalayas, evolved. And this collision, the collision was the one which this collision also coincided with another geological event that's happened, the volcanic eruption in the Deccan Peninsula around at the same time. So, and that was in history is one of the most intense volcanic eruption, and for almost for next some millions of years, the soot and dust it settled, and so that's how we saw the Deccan Plateau. So both these events came to occurred at most the simultaneous time. That gave us probably we think that whatever the endemic taxa we had in the Indian subcontinent or India as such would have probably wiped out. And so what we see today is probably to be colonized later from Africa or the Palearctic, from the the Eurasia or from the Indochina after the last 50 million years ago. So that probably the reason why we think that there are very few endemic taxa in Indian birds. And there are also, alternate theories to that, in the sense that, Ashok Sawhney, he believes that India was perhaps never isolated. The conventional knowledge is that India was isolated after its separation from Madagascar till it traveled, through the Indian Ocean and hit the Asian plate 50 million years ago. That means that 100 million years it was isolated. But that was our conventional wisdom. Knowledge. But Ashok Sawhney said that perhaps India was not as isolated as we thought, and it was always connected with the African mainland through the Mascarene Lacative Ridge. That's where the Lakshadweep is right now. So the birds could always come and go. It's like, there's no question of isolation as such. And there's a third alternate view is that John C. Briggs, which is a recent explanation, what he hypothesizes is that India was perhaps not connected with Africa, but then it moved very closely with, within that the west of the Indian Ocean. So in fact, he studied the recent divergence of marine fishes over the Western Indian Ocean and the Eastern Indian Ocean. And he didn't find much of difference, in the sense that their diversification was less than 3 million years ago. That was too short to have that endemism things. So these are the two alternate views, and but the conventional view is that the synergistic action of both our collision with the Asian plate and also the Deccan trap, the volcanic eruption. These two are the reasons. That's why there are endemic birds in India. But it's interesting because endemism generally, ecologists or biogeographers define endemism as not with the political boundary, but with the natural boundaries, biogeographical boundaries we call. Like, for example, if you take India as a political boundary, then it's only 79 birds or 78 or 79 birds are endemic. But if you take the Indian subcontinent, like, with the plate which moves away from Madagascar and hit the Asia, like it did now, right now, it include parts of Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Pakistan, Bhutan, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. So if you take that Indian subcontinent, there are 176 species endemic. So it's almost like 12% of these things, which is quite comparable to other countries which are rich in birds. So I think this question can also be, it could also be because India has a political things, we should probably look India as a biogeographical unit for the endemism things. Second thing is that why are there no endemic birds Lakshadweep? Like in Andaman and Nicobar, we have 29 or 32. It depends on which species taxonomy we follow. So there are almost 30 endemic species to Andaman and Nicobar Islands, but we haven't have even one on Lakshadweep Island, though Lakshadweep Islands are also equally isolated. The reason is that Andaman and Nicobar Island is actually, it's a volcanic origin, in the sense that they are actually it's a mountainous origin. Basically, Andaman and Nicobar are actually mountain top. So basically, the Arakan mountain range that separates India and Myanmar, that comes down south under the sea. And so wherever there's a mountain peaks that jets, that sticks out of the ocean surface, that becomes the islands. That's how the Andaman and Nicobar origins is. And so it got a lot of native vegetation. And the native vegetation means that niche diversification. Basically, the birds can occupy different niches, different places in this native vegetation. But Lakshadweep, on the contrary, your Lakshadweep Islands is a coral island on the ridge, on the Lacative Ridge. Basically, it's a coral deposit. So as such, there aren't any native vegetation on Lakshadweep. And Lakshadweep is generally, it's just a coral reefs. So since there's the absence of native vegetation, so there is any niche diversification for the birds to evolve or to diversify. And in fact, today, Lakshadweep also does not have many of birds as such, except they have some few seabirds, which is breeding in huge colonies there. But land birds as such, we have very few. I think only 42 or 43 species of land birds there in Lakshadweep, which might have been recent colonizers. Yeah, I hope that's clear.
And Ramamurthy has asked again the reference for Italian sparrowhawk, which you mentioned.
Okay, that is quite a few papers. There are 4 or 5 papers. So one paper which appeared in, I think, Journal of Animal Ecology. I don't exactly remember now the year and the author's name. But if you can just Google Scholar, Italian Sparrow, Journal of Animal Ecology, you should get that paper. And there is, I'm confused over the MC. Which of the following statements is true? Note, okay, but this is about the question.
Yeah. It's about the
can we discuss the question here, Amruta?
I'm not sure. So
I mean, if the assignment is still open, no. It's still open, no, Amrita?
yeah, it's open. Yeah.
Yeah. Only after it
Yes.
deadline passes, then we can.
Okay, so I think AK, can you please post this question again in the discussion forum once this, the next week, so that we can put the answer to that. Yeah. How to calculate breeding success? Of course, please wait for, there's a population ecology of birds in the coming weeks. Thanks. Yeah. Okay, Ratul, I think I just answered this question. Like Indian subcontinent, why 100% endemics and why India 79? That's mainly because it's a political versus biogeographical boundaries. Thank you, Ramamukti, for your kind words. Yeah. Any question that I missed, Amrita?
Oh, I think you have answered all the questions which is asked in the
Yeah, chat box. Yeah.
yeah, and the chat also. Yeah.
Yeah.
So someone said Juhi a difficulty in answering the response to an assignment. Could you please put this in the discussion form? Are you still facing this trouble? So we can get back to you.
Juhi, it might be useful to say a little bit more exactly what you're seeing. So basically, the assignment form, when you open it, it opens up a multiple choice question form, and then you can, once you tick the boxes, then you can save or you can submit. I think those are the options. So I'm not sure what you mean by PDF in that, Juhi. If you were there, you can just unmute and explain. Yeah, or else put your question in the Q&A discussion forum. Okay, so yeah, okay, a couple more questions.
I actually wanted to ask that there is specific reason why the endemics are more outside the political boundary of India. Oh, that's very simple, Ratul. So the political boundaries is actually in things, and if you take the biogeographical boundaries, so there is a reason why we consider the biogeographical boundaries, because it's just a plate, and it has, because as a plate moves, probably it was in isolation, right? Or whether it's isolation or it's a close connection with Africa, but then the plate moved as a whole. So obviously, we will have more species, and more species as isolated compared to the smaller part of that plate, which is India as the political boundary.
If I can just add, Jaipal, I think that,
Yes.
yeah, maybe the question, the way that Ratul has put it is a little confusing. Those endemics are in India as well, except that if we draw the boundary of India, then a few of them are found outside, for example, in Pakistan and Nepal and so on.
Yeah.
And so they wouldn't be considered endemic to India. But as soon as you draw the boundary that includes all of the Indian subcontinent, including, let's say, our neighboring countries, then suddenly those species become endemic to that larger region.
Right. Yeah.
So they are here, they are in India, except that depending on how you draw the boundary, they would be considered endemic or not endemic.
Yeah. Dilip D'Souza, most interesting this part of geology. Geology plays in this history of the evolution of birds. Is this typical of ornithology all over the world? Oh, yes, sir. In fact, the geology is the major study in the evolution of whether birds or even animals or organisms. In fact, you would be so surprised. Charles Darwin, who proposed, who conceived the natural selection and the theory of origin of birds, is actually he was a geologist by training and by these things. So, in fact, there's a group of geologists and who studied the evolution first, not the biologists as such. Yeah.
Okay, I think if all the questions have been addressed in some form or the other, we can call it a day. Please tune in next week. It won't be the same exact time. I think there's a different time next week, but that'll be on your calendar and you'll get reminders from NPTEL about it. All the best.
Suhail, there are some more questions, general
Some more
questions.
questions. Okay, I have to sign off, so I'll do that, Jaipal. And then whenever you finished answering, then you can end over
No,
here.
probably
I'll do
Amruta
a
can
question.
answer that. Someone wants to log in, how to log in with the Google account and
Yeah.
Sorry?
Okay. All right. Thanks, Jaipal. Thanks, everybody. Thanks.
yes, thanks, Suhail.
I don't know what happened here. I think this has to be
Yeah.
stopped.
I think
Somebody
someone
started a
might have
whiteboard.
opened the whiteboard.
Yeah.
Amruta, someone asked a question about Google account and how do I retrieve my user ID?
Sorry, I didn't saw the question. Is it in the chat?
Krishna iPad. Oh, sorry,
Okay.
Krishna iPad to me directly. Actually, it was typed
Okay.
to me directly. It says, at present, I am logging with Google account. How do I
Okay.
retrieve my user ID? I don't know what.
Okay, so once you're signing in, you are using your email ID, right? So your email ID and the password, which you used while the time of registration. I didn't get what exactly your doubt. You're asking me how to do the login or
So I have just retyped that question to everyone, Amruta.
sure.
Yeah, I didn't understand the question.
Logging with the Google account.
Your user ID is actually the Google mail ID, right?
Yeah. So the video recording available will be in the NPTEL portal again. So they will release the recorded live session videos. So you will get notification. Someone has asked about the videos.
Can you explain again about the videos? Amlan Biswas. Okay, first I read videos. Okay. So videos, Amlan Biswas, videos are actually, video needed, family video needed, they're songbirds. And videos are actually kind of subordinates, we call, we divide the passerines to two major groups, saints and subordinates. And they're essentially, North American and also part of Central America. The reason is that, we have shrike babblers, one group of these things in the Southeast Asia and also South Asia. For a very long time, we thought shrike babblers, they behave like, they look like, and they vocalize like, shrike babblers. So we thought that babblers. But recent molecular phylogeny, they found the shrike babblers are an outgroup with respect to the other babblers and tremolids. And interestingly, the shrike babblers are aligned with the vireos. And so that's how we now came to know that shrike babblers and vireos are perhaps the same family. And so perhaps they originated in Southeast Asia, and vireos might have colonized North America, but then, they became extinct in the Southeast Asia, leaving one particular phylogeny, that is the shrike babblers. So now that's one of the most interesting aspect about the molecular phylogeny, which we never suspected that vireos and shrike babblers were actually sister taxa.
Yeah, I think that is all of the questions we have asked, almost all the questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if if you want to ask any doubts or queries, you can. We have still time.
Yeah, there's some question. Subramanian, as far as I understood, cladogram is made purely through molecular biology, and then they are associated with the previously formed families according to taxonomy. This creates clades that are monophyly, paraphyly, and polyphyly. Now, why are families only affected by clades? Can bird change order because of some new molecular biology results? Oh, yes, sir, absolutely. In fact, what you have mentioned about cladogram is absolutely fine. But just one small correction is that cladogram not necessarily only through molecular phylogeny, because molecular phylogenetics or molecular techniques just a technique. So We can even form cladograms based on morphology, even based on vocalization, anything. So it is absolutely acceptable. But since the molecular techniques unmask the, the so-called the analogous characters, so-called, the similarities, it can easily unmask, unlike the morphology thing. So that's why people now trust more in molecular techniques. Otherwise, and also it's not just families, it can be anything. So, I wish to reiterate here again saying that, the monophily, paraphyly, and polyphily of any taxon. So the taxon could be any genus or species, genus or subgenus or order or family or subfamily at any level. So not necessarily at the family level. For example, very recent molecular work, they found that nightjars and swifts are no longer have to be put in the same order, Capri multiforms. In fact, in the presentation in the course, we are put in the same order, Capri multiforms, but now swifts have been separated as apodiforms, and frogmouths have been separated from patrocoubiforms. So they have been separated at the level of orders based on the molecular signal. So that's absolutely possible. How can we study anatomy and skeletal study in detail? So that will be taken the further weeks courses on bird anatomy. Is there any specific degree diploma to join ornithology institution? No, actually. So, for example, I can talk about Salim Ali Center for Ornithology where I work. So we don't really, there's, of course, there is a PG, post-graduation course in wildlife biology offered by almost 32 universities in India. But for the projects, the research projects that we advertise, not necessarily that only from wildlife biology or ornithology, but also life sciences. If you have a post-graduation in life sciences or in environmental sciences, you should be eligible for most of the research positions in the institution. Is third species interaction between birds and butterflies in any ecosystem? Well, species birds and butterflies, I can think of, only as, predator, prey and predator relationship, not really more than that. If we figure out through molecular biology that a species does not belong in a family, can't we just move it into other family? For example, human crownpecker belongs to the family of Corvidae or Compacting. So can't we just move this bird to other family so that Corvidae doesn't become a paraphyly? Oh, yeah, interesting question. But the question is that, when we find that, the Hume's groundpecker does not belong to the Corvidae, so we can either, yes, we can stop with that. But, but we won't stop at it, right? We want to actually know, it's curious to know, then what else, which else family does it belong to? If it doesn't belong to the Corvidae, it must be belonging to some other thing. So we want to know actually which other birds it has affinity, or is it phylogenetically or taxonomically very distinct? So what people do is that people do one step further, actually doing the phylogenetic analysis of the other birds. And so all these molecular phylogenies have been, put into what we call the GenBank. That's a universal, that's a global database. So all the species, whether the birds, butterflies, plants, mammals, everything. So whoever does the molecular phylogeny work, they have to put the data, the data being generated, the DNA structured data, so that amino acid DNA data have to be deposited with GenBank. So that becomes open access. So now if I do it for Hume's groundpecker, then I just put it in the GenBank and then see where it matches with these things. So that's how people find quite quickly what exactly the affinity for the birds. Amlan Biswas, why does polymorphism happen? Okay, polymorphism, well, I think that it will be covered in the plumages in third or fourth week, but I'll just answer your question. Polymorphism is supposed to arise through genetic mechanisms. So there are 3-4 competing hypotheses why polymorphism might have arrived, might have evolved, or whether does it give any adaptive, benefits to the taxon. So one major hypothesis is the disruptive selection. Basically, in the particular plumage coloration gets moved to two extremes, like dark morph or the light morph, based on, it gives an adaptive advantage because apparently it gives it's what we call as, luminar niche, basically the light niche. So the birds which occupy closed canopy or nighttime, the darker things will have a darker morph, and birds will have the light, or with the open canopy forest will have the lighter morph. But this has been demonstrated in few birds, but not all. So this is one thing. The other two hypotheses, like, you have also frequency dependent selection, and also you have, the analogous selection. So, but these are a bit technical, but to sum it up, it's more of a genetic structure, and maybe I think the population biology later, they might deal with this question. We can see mimicry in some of the butterflies, like blue tigers and some snakes. Are there any mimicry thing as such? Yes, of course, birds have vocal mimicry and plumage mimicry, social mimicry, and those will be dealt in detail in the further weeks ahead in the classes, animal behavior, bird behavior classes. Yeah, thanks, Subramanian. Actually, your questions are quite interesting. How to study niche of a particular species? Rathod Sindhu. So Rathod Sindhu, please wait for the the community ecology and population ecology lectures are going to come up. They fall down the weeks. So your answer, you can find the answers. How to study the niche or habitats of a bird.
So if there are any questions coming up, then I think we can wind up the session. Thank you, Jaywal, and all the students who joined in. Please do ask your doubts in the discussion forum. As we said, we don't have any WhatsApp group. We will message. The notifications will be in the portal, in the discussion forum. So, yeah, any doubts regarding the course or anything you want to discuss? If not, I think we can wind up the session.
Yeah, thanks, Amrita, and thanks for all the participants.
Thank you, everyone.